So I've been playing Destiny for nearly 8 years now, since the very first days of Destiny 1, and I think I just found my favorite PvE build of all time. One of the things that's always bugged me a little bit about other PvE builds is that I feel like I'm usually optimizing for just one thing: survivability, crowd control, boss DPS, whatever it might be. But this build does all of these things incredibly well, and it has something else that's amazing. You basically never have to reload. Reloading is lame. It reduces your damage output, it gets you killed, it's just not very fun. So we want more pew pew and less reload time. And this build has essentially removed any need to manually reload ever again with your weapons. You're going to have nearly 100% uptime on invisibility, so enemies aren't going to bug you. You get your health back on each kill, so you're incredibly tanky. You suppress the big enemies so they're not going to bother you while you're dicing them up to bits, and you rapidly recharge all of your abilities when they're on cooldown. I swear I've never had more fun playing PvE in Destiny, and here's how this build works. So the cornerstone is the new Void 3.0 Hunter with the Mobius Quiver super. This allows us to go invisible in a number of ways, which we'll discuss in a second, and the super deals some insane damage to yellow bars, bosses, and big groups of enemies. For our weapons, we're going to go with the Witherhoard Exotic Grenade Launcher. This is one of my favorite PvE weapons in the game, and basically what it does is it shoots a giant blight of taken energy on the ground that does AoE damage to any enemies who are in it. But it also allows you to hit enemies directly with a grenade launcher, and then when they take damage over time and eventually die, it will spawn that blight at their feet. So it's just a great weapon overall for PvE. But my favorite part about it is that if you get the exotic catalyst, it basically gets auto-loading holster, so you never have to reload this weapon. As long as it's stowed and you have ammo, whenever you're on your other weapons, it's going to passively reload in the background. For our energy slot, we're using the new glaive, the Enigma. Now at first, I was not very impressed with this weapon, to be honest. I thought it was kind of bad, and I really didn't give it much credit. But the more time I've spent with this, specifically on my hunter, I'm absolutely in love with this thing, and I'm going to explain why it's so awesome in a few seconds. The roll that you have on it actually doesn't matter all that much for this build, and there's probably some ways you can optimize it. What I would say though is you probably want to go with major spec to cut down the yellow bars a little bit faster. I don't find that you need minor spec for the red bars too often. Maybe in very high content you might want to go with minor spec, but for the most part I found that major spec is the more helpful mod here. And for the traits, I've been going with Thresh to get my super back even faster, but really you can use whatever you like best here. For your heavy slot, you want to use any sort of a rocket launcher that has auto-loading holster. Now I'm using the Tomorrow's Answer Adept version, which allows me to use the Adept Big One spec, and I really like this rocket launcher, but really any of them will do. The main thing you're looking for is something with auto-loading holster, and the reason is that it can reload itself just like the Witherhoard passively as long as you have ammo and you're on a different weapon. Ideally you want this to be a void rocket launcher for reasons I'll explain in a second, but it's not that big of a deal if it's a different element, and sometimes it's actually helpful if you're doing solo content because it'll give you a little bit of diversity if you are playing content that might have match game and you need some different types of shields to be taken down. Alright, let's cover the hunter setup and then we'll go over the armor and all the mods that make this so awesome. So first of all, I'm typically using Marksman's Dodge here, and that's just so that I can dodge quickly to reload. You can use Gambler's Dodge if you want to have your melee ability back, but with the way I'm playing this, I don't really find that I need it that much, and so I personally prefer Marksman's for the quick reload. I'm using Triple Jump because I think it's the best PvE jump in the game, but if you prefer one of the other ones, that's fine too. I personally go with Triple Jump. For your grenade, you can pick any of these, but I personally prefer the Vortex Grenade, and that's because it has the most generous area of effect, and also when you throw it at enemies who are kind of nearby, it will suck them into it like the old Duskfield grenades and kind of lock them in place. So I find it to be a really good grenade, and the main way we're using our grenade in the first place is to deal AoE damage to large groups of enemies and also to debuff big targets like bosses and heavy yellow bars. For our aspects, I like to go with Vanishing Step to make me invisible whenever I dodge. The main use here is that if I'm not already invisible from attacking with my glaive, I can dodge to go invis immediately, get up close to the targets, and then start suppressing them with the glaive. We'll talk about that in a second. It also has the benefit of 2 fragment slots, which is really handy. For our other aspect, we want to go with the Stylish Executioner, and this one's really non-negotiable for this build. It's very important for how the glaive interacts with suppressing targets and going back invisible. For the fragments, I like Echo of Domineering, which is going to reload our weapon anytime we suppress a target, which is going to happen quite a bit with this build. I like Echo of Leeching, which restores both our health and our allies' health who are nearby anytime we get a melee kill, and yes, this does count with the glaive, at least for right now. Next, I would pick Echo of Undermining. This is basically like the old Oppressive Darkness for our grenades. It does have a pretty hefty discipline penalty, but I think it's worth it because this is one of the ways that we're going to debuff our targets to make those yellow bars go down even faster. And finally, we want to go with Echo of Exchange. This makes our melee final blows grant grenade energy, and yes, once again, this does count with glaives, which is really awesome for this build. Okay, let's swing over to the armor and look at all the different mods that we're going to be using. This is where this build gets absolutely crazy because there's just so much synergy here. For our helmet, I've been using rocket launcher ammo finder and grenade launcher ammo finder just so we have plenty of ammo for both of our special weapons. Since we're not using a primary, we really need to make sure we have enough special, and this seems to really help quite a bit. And then for the last mod, that's Volatile Flow, which comes from the seasonal artifact. This one's going to give us volatile rounds from picking up an elemental well, which is going to happen quite a bit. For our gloves, there's a couple different ways you can do this. What I found to be the best so far is to use a stasis gloves, and that way we can use the grenade kickstart mod. This is going to make it so that whenever we throw a grenade, we immediately get a huge chunk of our grenade energy refunded. It's effectively like having quite a bit higher of a discipline stat. If you're running any kind of content that doesn't feature unstoppable champions, then I would actually maybe run a second grenade kickstart mod here, but I have unstoppable glaive on because most of the content I've been doing lately seems to have unstoppable, so it's a really easy one to slot, and stunning the unstoppable champions is really easy with the glaive. And finally, we have Font of Might, which is going to give us a damage to any of our void weapons whenever we pick up those void wells. This one also comes from the seasonal artifact. For our chest, we can run this a lot of different ways. You can basically use any of these different resist mods that might help you to stay alive in the content that you're doing. I've been typically running the thermoshock plating as well as a concussive dampener mod, and if you're not having any trouble staying alive, you might actually want to go with the rocket launcher reserves instead so that you have more ammo for your rocket launcher. And finally here, we have Reaping Wellmaker. This is going to be our generator to make those elemental wells on this build. Anytime we dodge and then get a kill with our weapon, it's going to spawn one of those void elemental wells. For our boots, we want to run the Orpheus Rig exotic boots. This is going to upgrade our Mobius quiver to have 3 shots instead of 2, which is going to massively increase our damage. And for the mods, you definitely want Rocket Launcher Scavenger so you get more ammo for your rocket launcher, and you can pick either if you want Glaive Scavenger or if you want Grenade Launcher Scavenger, depending on which one you seem like you're running out of more. Personally, I've been running the Glaive Scavenger because I feel like I run out of that ammo a little bit more frequently than the Wither Horde, but you can switch it out pretty easily if you find the opposite. And finally here, we want Well of Tenacity. This is going to make it so that anytime we pick up those void elemental wells, we're going to take less damage. It's basically another way that we're going to be more tanky and harder to kill. And for our class item, we're going 2 mods from the seasonal artifact. Energy Vampirism is going to give us energy for our least charged ability anytime we suppress a target. And that's going to be happening quite a bit thanks to the next mod we're running, which is Suppressing Glaive. This is going to make it so that anytime we damage someone with our glaive, which is either the melee attack or the ranged attack, it's going to suppress them, which is going to make them not use their abilities for a short time. I can't even explain how incredibly good this is against those big yellow bars who have those heavy ability attacks. They're basically stun locked while you're invisible and just slashing away at them, and they have no idea what's going on. It's the cornerstone of what makes this build so incredibly powerful. Don't worry too much about my exact stats, by the way, because my hunter's totally not optimized and it's still shredding through any content I try with this build. If I can make it perfect, I think I'd prioritize recovery, then mobility, then discipline, then intellect, but really it just doesn't matter all that much. Here's how the gameplay loop works in general. First of all, you shoot your Wither Horde and rocket at the ground to kill big groups of enemies, including yellow bars. These both auto-reload whenever your glaive is out, and your glaive doesn't require any ammo at all to perform the light attack. When you suppress an enemy with the glaive, you're getting extra mobility and you're also reloading the glaive automatically. You can go invisible by dodging if you're in danger, and then run up to an enemy and start smashing that melee button to suppress them and go ham on them. If it's an especially tanky yellow bar, you can use your invisibility to get a little bit of distance and reapply the Wither Horde and shoot another rocket before you go back to slashing. You charge up your glaive shield by landing hits with a heavy ranged attack. The shield can be really helpful for staying alive in between packs of enemies or whenever your invisibility runs out for a second if you don't have that dodge back up yet. When you hit an enemy with your glaive that doesn't just die immediately, it's suppressing them so they're not going to use their abilities on you, it's giving you health whenever you kill them, and it's also making you invisible again when you kill them. When you kill an enemy after dodging, you're going to spawn an elemental void well from the Reaping Wellmaker mod. And when you pick up the well, you're getting a damage buff from Font of Might, you're getting volatile rounds from Volatile Flow, which is going to make enemies easier to kill, and they're also going to explode on death if they're volatile, dealing AoE damage. You're also going to be much tankier thanks to the Well of Tenacity mod. Melee kills are going to generate back some of your grenade energy from the Echo of Exchange Fragment, they'll heal you on kill from the Echo of Leeching, and they'll also reload your glaive automatically from the Echo of Domineering. And anytime you suppress an enemy with the glaive, Energy Vampirism is going to give you a huge chunk of energy back to whatever ability is the lowest. When it comes time for boss damage or just taking out a huge enemy, you have one of the strongest DPS combos in the entire game at your disposal. Here's how I would recommend approaching your DPS rotation. First of all, throw a grenade to apply the weakening effect, then shoot your Wither Horde and then your rocket launcher and then switch back to your glaive. Then fire your first shot of your Mobius quiver to activate the super. Switch back to fire another rocket and then swap back to your glaive so it auto reloads in the background, and then fire another arrow of the Mobius quiver. Then when you hear it's reloaded in the background, you can swap back to your rocket to shoot another one, swap back to the glaive, and then fire your final arrow from your super, and then you can just alternate between rockets, Witherhoard, and the glaive until a target's dead. I promise you, this is not going to take very long for them to go down. It deals some wild single target damage. When recording for this video, I was actually having a hard time finding a boss with enough health to actually show you the full rotation, so it definitely deals quite a bit of damage. Whenever you need to deal champions, you have a lot of tricks up your sleeve. First of all, you have Unstoppable handled with the glaive, and then you can throw an overload grenade mod into your class item that comes from the artifact. And if you need to take care of any anti-barrier champs, you can just swap the Witherhoard over to a bow or a scout rifle to take care of them. I would suggest trying the Wish Ender, which just got that beefy 40% primary exotic weapon damage buff in the Witch Queen. Overall, this is just the most fun I've had in PvE in a long time, and I keep looking for more difficult challenges to try that really push the limits of this build. If you have any suggestions on how to make this better, please let me know in the comments, and I'm excited for you to try it out. If you like this, be sure to check out my recent Void 3.0 Hunter guide with some tips on how to play the class in both PvE and PvP. It's a video on the top right of your screen and also linked in the description.